The harsh, fluorescent light reflected off the cold white porcelain plates, creating an almost blinding glare that seemed to mock everything in its path. The crystal chandeliers of the country club restaurant cast ethereal halos throughout the dining room, making every corner feel surreal and disconnected from reality. The air was thick with an intoxicating mixture of expensive perfumes, aged cigars, and gourmet cuisine, while the low murmur of conversation buzzed like a swarm of bees throughout the opulent space. This was my father James Williams' 60th birthday celebration, hosted at his Pride and Joy, the exclusive country club where membership was by invitation only. This place served as the ultimate social playground for Silicon Valley's elite, the very embodiment of the status symbol my businessman father had spent his entire life pursuing with unwavering determination. I stood there wearing the restaurant's standard black uniform, a crisp white shirt that had been starched to perfection, black trousers that fell just right, and an apron whose edges had been worn thin from years of constant use. This had been my daily attire for the past 7 years, but tonight, in this gleaming temple of wealth and privilege, it seemed completely out of place, like a discordant note in an otherwise perfect symphony. "And this is my eldest, Marcus." My father's voice rang out with unmistakable pride as he raised his champagne flute toward my brother, who sat directly across from him at the head table. "He's a leading cardiac surgeon at the Mayo Clinic, a true lifesaver, someone who makes a real difference in this world." Polite applause rippled through the gathering, sparse but respectful. Marcus nodded graciously, his custom-tailored suit perfectly accentuating his athletic physique, the result of years of disciplined fitness routines that somehow fit into his demanding schedule. The Patek Philippe watch on his wrist caught the light for just a moment, a subtle but unmistakable display of success. He commanded a salary well over $400,000 annually, making him the undisputed golden child of our family. "And my lovely Zoe," father continued, his gaze shifting to my sister beside me, his tone becoming even more tender and warm. "She just made junior partner at her law firm, top of her class at Stanford Law. We are incredibly proud of everything she has accomplished." Zoe smiled with practiced elegance, her diamond earrings, worth more than most people's annual salary, catching the light and making her face glow with an almost ethereal radiance. At $300,000 a year, with partnerships and bonuses on the horizon, her future seemed limitless and bright. Then came the extended family members, each introduction more glowing than the last. "Of course, you all know my nephew Deshaun," father said, his arm sweeping around the shoulders of my hefty cousin, who sat proudly beside him. "A self-made man in the truest sense of the word. 15 restaurants, and counting across 3 states. A genuine entrepreneur who built his empire from absolutely nothing." Deshaun Carter, the undisputed king of the regional restaurant scene, boasted assets worth $300 million. He swirled his wine glass with obvious satisfaction, the deep red liquid swirling like liquid prosperity. His success story was the stuff of family legend, a young man who had started with a single food truck and built a culinary empire through sheer determination and business acumen. "And my brilliant niece, Tanya," father announced, gesturing toward another family member with obvious reverence. "A vice president at Goldman Sachs. She handles deals that are bigger than my entire business operation." Tanya Brooks, the Wall Street powerhouse, offered only a polite smile in response, her eyes betraying the cool calculation and analytical precision that had made her legendary in financial circles. Her success was measured not just in dollars, but in the respect she commanded in one of the most competitive industries in the world. Finally, as the introductions wound down, all eyes inevitably turned toward me. Throughout the entire evening, I had remained silent, standing at the edge of the table like an actual server, invisible yet somehow uncomfortably present. My father's confident smile faltered for just a moment, a crack appearing in his otherwise perfect facade. He cleared his throat awkwardly, and all that magnificent pride seemed to evaporate into the opulent air around us. He paused, clearly searching for the right words, carefully weighing each syllable before finally speaking in a tone that was notably colder and more detached than anything that had come before. "And my youngest daughter, Jasmine," he said with the flat delivery of someone reading a grocery list. "She is working in a restaurant." The air in the room became absolutely suffocating. Those words hit the gathering like a stone thrown into a perfectly still pond, but instead of creating gentle ripples, they generated waves of uncomfortable silence that seemed to crash against every corner of the dining room. The entire space fell into a death-like quiet, broken only by the distant clinking of silverware against china, which suddenly seemed deafeningly loud in the oppressive stillness. I could feel more than a dozen pairs of eyes boring into me simultaneously, their gazes carrying a complex mixture of pity, barely concealed contempt, and undisguised disdain. Some faces showed genuine sympathy, as if I were a charity case to be pitied, while others displayed the kind of social discomfort that comes from witnessing someone else's public humiliation. My mother, Patricia's eyes were filled with worry and heartbreak, clearly wanting to say something, anything, to ease the tension, but father's stern glare immediately silenced any words she might have offered. The pain in her expression was almost unbearable to witness. The oppressive silence was finally shattered by my cousin Deshawn. He let out an exaggerated snort of laughter, leaning forward in his chair with the confidence of someone who had never known real failure, and spoke in his characteristically oily voice that seemed to fill the entire room. 7 years in the same position? Jasmine, I told you this before, and I'll tell you again. Without a college degree, you'll never advance in this industry. Every single one of my managers has hospitality degrees from respected state universities. You're absolutely wasting what should be the most productive years of your life. Before his words had even finished echoing through the room, several other guests were already nodding in agreement, their faces showing a mixture of pity and superiority. I could see my brother Marcus slightly furrow his brow, clearly embarrassed to be associated with what he perceived as family failure, while my sister Zoe deliberately avoided making eye contact with me, suddenly becoming intensely interested in studying the dessert menu as if it contained the secrets of the universe. I did not respond with anger or defensiveness. Instead, I simply stood there in perfect stillness, my gaze calmly and deliberately sweeping across every single person at that table. My father, whose disappointment stemmed from wounded vanity and social embarrassment, my siblings, who felt genuine shame about my perceived failures, and that cousin who presumed to judge 7 years of my life based on his 30 years of conventional success. My silence was not born from weakness, submission, or shame. On the contrary, it arose from a type of absolute confidence that none of them could possibly understand or comprehend. Because I possessed knowledge of a secret that not one person in that room could even imagine. A secret worth $10 billion. 7 years ago, I had indeed been nothing more than a simple restaurant server. After graduating from high school, instead of following the path my brother and sister had taken to prestigious universities, I had chosen to take a job at a local fast food establishment. In the context of my family's expectations and values, this decision was nothing short of complete betrayal of everything they held dear. My daily responsibilities consisted of taking orders, serving meals, and clearing tables. The work was monotonous, repetitive, and seemingly endless. However, during those countless busy days and exhausting nights, I began to truly observe the world around me with scientific precision. I watched young parents reluctantly ordering high-calorie fried chicken and French fries for their children, their faces showing obvious resignation and guilt. I observed health-conscious office workers standing indecisively in front of menu boards during lunch rushes, ultimately forced to settle for bland, uninspiring salads. I listened carefully as countless customers complained about why convenient, fast food always seemed to be synonymous with unhealthy choices. I began systematically recording data and patterns. I did not use any sophisticated software or expensive equipment, just a simple notebook and a pen. I meticulously documented which foods were discarded most frequently each day, what questions customers asked most often when placing their orders, and which healthy options proved most popular with different demographic groups. Day after day, month after month, these seemingly scattered observations gradually formed a clear and comprehensive picture of market demand. People desperately needed a fast food alternative that was simultaneously delicious, convenient, and genuinely healthy. A completely unexpected opportunity presented itself when I encountered Dr. Alastair Finch during one of his regular visits to our restaurant. He appeared to be nothing more than an ordinary retired gentleman wearing a faded Massachusetts Institute of Technology sweatshirt that had clearly seen better days. We engaged in casual conversation, starting with comments about the weather and progressing to discussion of that day's lunch specials. When I casually mentioned some of my preliminary thoughts about reconstructing meat fiber texture using plant proteins, his eyes suddenly came alive with intense interest. It turned out that this seemingly ordinary elderly customer was far from ordinary. He was a professor emeritus from MIT's Food Science Department, a recognized authority who had spent 40 years immersed in the cutting-edge fields of molecular gastronomy and food technology innovation. That chance encounter initiated what would become 3 years of intensive, secretive collaboration that would change both our lives forever. During daylight hours, I remained Jasmine, the restaurant server, taking orders and clearing tables with a smile. However, when darkness fell, I would make my way to a rented garage that we had converted into a makeshift but functional laboratory. Dr. Finch and I worked together, conducting over 300 separate experiments with methodical precision. We tested countless combinations of plant proteins, researching how to manipulate temperature, pressure, and enzymatic catalysis to perfectly simulate the authentic texture and flavor profiles of real meat products. Those were days filled with repeated failures, chemical odors that seemed to penetrate everything we owned, and moments of crushing disappointment when promising formulations fell short of our exacting standards. However, neither of us ever seriously considered abandoning our ambitious project. Eventually, after years of persistent effort and countless iterations, we achieved breakthrough success. We had successfully developed a revolutionary plant-based solution that could perfectly replicate the flavor, texture, and cooking properties of beef and chicken, while maintaining production costs 30% lower than traditional meat products. The next phase involved securing funding for commercial development. Armed with our prototype product and comprehensive market research data, I began knocking on doors throughout Silicon Valley's venture capital community. The seed round came first. An angel investor listened to my 5-minute elevator pitch with growing excitement, then immediately wrote a check for $5 million on the spot. He later told me that he was not investing in the technology itself, but rather in what he called the hunger he could see burning in my eyes. Series A funding followed. I deliberately wore my restaurant server uniform when I walked into the conference room of a prestigious venture capital firm. The partners initially assumed I was there to deliver coffee and pastries. 30 minutes later, after witnessing my presentation, they decided to lead a $25 million investment round. Series B proved even more successful as word spread about our product's remarkable performance in limited market testing. Later stage investors began competing aggressively for the opportunity to participate. We easily secured $70 million in additional funding, with multiple firms fighting to be included in the round. By the third year of the company's existence, our valuation had surpassed $1 billion, officially earning us recognition as one of Silicon Valley's most coveted unicorn companies. My personal net worth had reached $200 million, making me wealthier than I had ever dared to imagine possible. I had deliberately chosen to keep this success completely secret for three distinct and carefully considered reasons. First, we were in the middle of delicate negotiations with McDonald's Corporation regarding an exclusive partnership potentially worth hundreds of millions of dollars. The strict non-disclosure agreements governing these discussions legally prevented me from revealing any details about our business operations or financial status. Second, the business world was notoriously unpredictable and filled with unexpected challenges. Premature exposure would only invite unnecessary complications, aggressive competition, and potentially hostile acquisition attempts that could derail our carefully planned growth strategy. However, the most important reason was deeply personal in nature. I wanted to respond to my family's years of dismissal and disappointment with undeniable, overwhelming success that would speak louder than any words ever could. I was determined to prove conclusively that a blue-collar job does not define a person's ultimate potential or worth. Therefore, I continued working as a restaurant server with renewed purpose. This job was no longer simply a means of survival, but rather the most effective possible channel for gathering first-hand market feedback about our products and industry trends. I could personally hear customers' genuine reactions to our company's offerings, though they had no idea of my connection to the products they were discussing. These invaluable insights provided information that no market research report could possibly replicate. The truth has a way of eventually surfacing, regardless of how carefully it has been hidden. The catalyst for my exposure came from a disgruntled former employee whom I had been forced to terminate for performance issues. He published a vindictive post on LinkedIn, complaining bitterly about being fired by some high school dropout waitress boss, while vaguely hinting at our company's name and business operations. This post began spreading through social media like a virus. Initially, it circulated only within Silicon Valley's tight-knit technology community, but soon, investigative journalists with keen instincts for sensational stories detected the explosive news potential hidden within these cryptic complaints. Fast Company magazine broke the story first, publishing an in-depth investigative piece titled "From Waitress to Billion-Dollar Founder: The Double Life of Jasmine Williams." The article instantly exploded across the internet, generating millions of views and shares within hours of publication. Fortune magazine quickly followed, featuring me as their cover story with an even more direct headline, "The Waitress with a Billion-Dollar Secret." The cover photograph showed me wearing my familiar server uniform, staring directly into the camera with unwavering determination and quiet confidence. On Twitter and Instagram, the hashtag #Waitress2Founder rapidly climbed to #1 on global trending lists. My story became packaged and marketed as a modern version of the American dream, a compelling narrative about disruption, innovation, persistence, and the power of hidden potential. I suspect that my father discovered the truth during this media frenzy, probably while conducting a Google search of my name out of curiosity or concern. I can easily imagine his facial expression when those shocking headlines first appeared on his computer screen. Initial disbelief, followed by overwhelming confusion, and then a gradually dawning realization of the magnitude of what had been happening under his nose. His son, the prestigious doctor, and his daughter, the accomplished lawyer, whom he had always considered the family's greatest achievements, suddenly paled in comparison to his other daughter, the one he had just publicly humiliated in front of all his friends, the one he had dismissed as a failure, who had quietly built a $10 billion company. My brother Marcus also discovered the news coverage. He called me immediately, his voice literally trembling with shock and disbelief. He had apparently performed quick mental calculations, realizing that my $200 million personal net worth represented dozens, possibly hundreds of times, his entire career earnings potential. The sense of superiority he had built upon his medical degree and elite professional status crumbled instantly into dust. My cousin Deshawn was rendered completely speechless for an extended period. He had spent 30 years painstakingly building his $300 million restaurant empire through conventional business methods and incremental growth. Meanwhile, I had achieved what he considered impossible, reaching heights he could never hope to attain. In just 3 years, using approaches he could not even begin to comprehend. The young woman he had mocked for having no future without a degree had completely revolutionized the business logic upon which his entire success was founded. My sister, Zoe's reaction proved the most complex and emotionally conflicted. She sent me an extremely long message filled with shame, confusion, and a barely detectable undercurrent of genuine admiration for what I had accomplished, despite all the obstacles. My mother's response was the most straightforward and heartbreaking. She simply cried uncontrollably during our phone conversation. An emergency family video conference call was convened exactly as I had anticipated. This represented a typical American family approach to handling dramatic revelations: direct confrontation, immediate discussion, and complete transparency about everyone's feelings and perspectives. On my computer screen, the faces of my father, mother, brother, and sister appeared in succession, each displaying various degrees of shock, confusion, and emotional turmoil. My father's complexion had turned an unhealthy shade of gray, and he was the first to break the heavy silence that hung over our virtual gathering. "Why didn't you tell us?" he asked, his voice hoarse and filled with the bitter resentment of someone who felt profoundly deceived and manipulated. I looked directly at him with perfect composure, delivering my response in measured, deliberate tones. "Because I needed to prove that a blue-collar job doesn't define your ceiling. Because I needed to prove that you and everyone in that room that night were completely and utterly wrong about me and my potential. You said I would never succeed without a college degree," I continued, directing my gaze squarely at my father with ice-cold precision. "I built a billion-dollar company in 3 years." Then I turned my attention toward where my cousin Deshawn would have been sitting if he had been included in this family conference call. Deshawn spent 30 years building a $300 million business. I think anyone can do the math on who made the right choice about their career path. My words cut through their carefully constructed facades like a razor-sharp blade, exposing the fundamental hollowness of the value systems they had used to judge success. Their obsession with credentials, social status, and conventional markers of achievement. My brother Marcus appeared genuinely devastated by this revelation. He spoke in a confused mumble, as if addressing me while simultaneously questioning his own life choices. "Wait, your net worth is actually $200 million? My entire medical career, even if everything goes perfectly, might generate $15 million in total lifetime earnings. You accomplished this in just 3 years?" He pressed his hand against his forehead in obvious distress. "I think I need to sit down and process this information." Complete silence dominated our video call. Rather than experiencing satisfaction from this moment of vindication, I felt unexpectedly exhausted and emotionally drained. What I had truly wanted was not their submission or acknowledgement of my superiority, but rather their understanding and genuine acceptance of who I had chosen to become. Consequently, I decided to announce my next major initiative. I am officially launching the Waitress Fund, I declared with quiet authority. A $50 million venture capital fund dedicated specifically to supporting innovators and entrepreneurs from blue-collar backgrounds. People who possess brilliant ideas but lack the traditional credentials, social connections, or initial capital necessary to transform those ideas into reality. I studied the shocked expressions on my family members' faces before continuing. In America, we constantly say that anyone can make it if they work hard enough, but we simultaneously create barriers that prevent people from succeeding: educational requirements, professional credentials, social class expectations. I am here to systematically remove those barriers for people who were exactly like I was. That is the fundamental mission of the Waitress Fund. This time, the redemption I sought was not for my family members, but for the countless thousands of other people who had faced the same dismissal and underestimation that I had experienced. 1 week later, my company joined with McDonald's Corporation to host a major press conference, officially announcing our strategic partnership to the world. Our revolutionary technology would initially be tested in 50 McDonald's locations across the United States, providing millions of consumers with healthier fast food alternatives, with plans to expand to 500 locations within 12 months. Camera flashes exploded around me like lightning as I stood under the bright spotlights, presenting myself to the world for the first time in my role as Chief Executive Officer of a major corporation. I told my complete story, describing my journey from restaurant server to technology company founder. I spoke passionately about innovation, equal opportunity, and the importance of recognizing potential in unexpected places. At the conclusion of the press conference, a journalist raised her hand with a final question. Miss Williams, looking back at everything that has happened, do you harbor any resentment toward your family members for their previous lack of understanding and support? I remained silent for several moments, considering my response carefully, then smiled warmly at the camera and delivered an answer that surprised everyone in attendance. No, I do not resent them at all. In fact, I want to publicly thank them, I said with genuine sincerity. Thank you for showing me exactly what I needed to overcome. It was their doubt that fueled my determination. It was the ceiling they set for me that I became so desperate to break through. Without that motivation, I might still just be a waitress. But now, I am the waitress who is changing the world. In the audience, I could see my family members sitting in the front row. My father, mother, brother, and sister were all present. Their eyes no longer contained dismissal, embarrassment, or disappointment. Instead, they showed something I had never seen before: a complex mixture of genuine, heartfelt pride. I understood that our family relationship still had a long journey ahead toward complete healing and understanding. However, we had finally taken the crucial first step toward reconciliation. My story was just beginning to unfold. The day after the press conference concluded, I had expected to enter a period of relative calm and routine business operations, but fate seemed to have different plans entirely. That morning, at exactly 10 o'clock, I was conducting a meeting at our company headquarters in Palo Alto, discussing specific implementation details for our McDonald's partnership with my senior management team. My assistant, Sarah, burst through the conference room door with obvious urgency, her face displaying unmistakable anxiety. Jasmine, your father is downstairs in the lobby. He says he has something extremely important to discuss with you. I felt genuinely surprised by this unexpected development. Since the press conference, my father, James, had maintained complete silence except for sending one brief congratulatory text message. We had not engaged in any meaningful communication, and I had assumed he needed considerable time to process and accept this dramatic change in our family dynamics. "Please ask him to come up to my office," I instructed. "I'll see him immediately." 10 minutes later, my father appeared in my office doorway. He was wearing an impeccably tailored, deep navy blue suit, but I could easily detect his nervousness through subtle facial expressions I had learned to read during childhood. His eyes moved restlessly between the massive floor-to-ceiling windows behind my desk and the spectacular Silicon Valley skyline beyond, as if he were still struggling to accept this new reality. "Dad, please have a seat," I said, gesturing toward the comfortable seating area. "Would you like something to drink?" "Coffee would be perfect," he replied, his voice slightly hoarse with emotion. I poured coffee for both of us, then sat across from him in the facing chair. Silence stretched between us for nearly a full minute before he finally found the courage to speak. "Jasmine, I need to offer you a sincere and complete apology." This statement caught me completely off guard. In all my childhood memories, my father had rarely apologized to anyone, especially not to his children. That night at the country club, He paused mid-sentence, clearly searching for exactly the right words to express his feelings. "I humiliated you in front of everyone. I introduced you in that dismissive tone, in front of all our family friends and business associates. When I think about it now, I feel deeply ashamed of my behavior." I chose not to respond immediately, instead observing him carefully and allowing him to continue expressing his thoughts. "You know what I did after I learned the truth?" he continued. "I spent 3 complete days reading every single article written about you and your company. I researched your technology, studied your funding rounds, and learned about your business partnerships. I even attempted to read those academic research papers, although I must admit I struggled with most of the scientific terminology." He lifted his head and looked directly into my eyes with complete sincerity. "I finally understand that I have a genius daughter, and I, because of my narrow-minded value system and stubborn preconceptions, almost missed the opportunity to feel proud of her incredible achievements." These words touched something deep within my heart. I felt my throat begin to tighten with emotion. "Dad, you don't need to—" "No, I absolutely need to say this," he interrupted firmly. "I need to get these words out. For years, I believed success followed a rigid, predetermined pattern. Prestigious university, advanced degree, high-status career, then gradually climbing to the top of the social hierarchy. I imposed this narrow template on all of you children, and when you chose a different path, I automatically assumed you had failed." He paused to take a sip of his coffee before continuing. "But now I understand that the real failure was mine. I failed as a father." I could feel my eyes beginning to well up with tears. This conversation was developing in ways I had never anticipated or imagined possible. "Jasmine, I want to ask for your forgiveness, but I know that simply apologizing is not sufficient." He reached into his briefcase and withdrew a thick manila folder. "I want to demonstrate my sincerity through concrete actions." He pushed the folder across the coffee table toward me. "These are all the legal documents for Williams Consulting, my company. I have decided to transfer complete ownership to you." I stared at him in absolute shock. "Dad, what exactly are you saying?" "My consulting company is valued at approximately $20 million. I realize this probably seems insignificant compared to your achievements, but this business represents my life's work and everything I have built over the past 30 years. His voice began to tremble with emotion. I want you to accept this transfer, not because of the monetary value, but because this is the most sincere way I can think of to express my apology and demonstrate my respect for what you have accomplished. I opened the folder and found comprehensive company documentation, legal papers, detailed financial statements, and a fully executed stock transfer agreement with my name already filled in as the recipient. Dad, I cannot possibly accept this, I said, closing the folder and pushing it back toward him. This is your company, your achievement, your legacy. No, he shook his head emphatically. This should rightfully belong to you. You have already proven that you understand how to build and operate a business far better than any of us ever imagined possible. And furthermore, he paused thoughtfully, I have a proposal I would like to make. He straightened up in his chair, and I noticed a spark of excitement in his eyes that I had rarely seen before. I want to join your company. What did you just say? I want to work for you, Jasmine. His tone was completely serious and determined. I have 30 years of business experience, and while I admit I am completely inexperienced in technology, I understand traditional business operations and know how to negotiate with established, conservative business leaders. Your company is forming partnerships with major corporations like McDonald's, and I believe my experience could be genuinely valuable to your continued growth. I could hardly believe what I was hearing. My father, the same man who had felt ashamed that I worked as a server, now wanted to work for me. I don't want any senior executive position or special treatment, he continued earnestly. I am willing to start at entry level and work my way up based on merit. I want to learn your business model, understand your strategic thinking, and discover how you approach problem solving. I want to truly understand how my daughter is changing the world. At that moment, I could no longer contain my emotions. Tears began flowing down my cheeks. Dad, my voice was choked with emotion. If you think this arrangement would be inappropriate, I will completely understand, he said, his own voice beginning to waver. I know I have no right to ask for this opportunity. Don't say that, I interrupted, standing up and walking over to embrace him. This was our first genuine hug in many years. Of course it's appropriate. I would be honored to work alongside you. He held me tightly, and I could feel his shoulders trembling slightly with emotion. Thank you, Jasmine. Thank you for giving me this chance to become a better father. After we separated, I sat back down and immediately began considering how to integrate him into our company structure. So, Mr. James Williams, I said with playful formality, when would you be available to start your new position? He smiled with more genuine warmth than I had seen from him in years. I can start immediately, although I should probably warn you that I will need training on how to use Slack and all those collaboration tools I have never heard of before. No problem at all, I laughed. We have an excellent employee onboarding program. At that precise moment, my phone rang. It was my public relations manager calling with obvious urgency. Jasmine, I apologize for interrupting your meeting, but we have developed a situation. Somehow, the media has discovered that your father came to see you. There are at least 20 reporters gathered outside the building right now, all waiting to photograph this father-daughter reunion. My father and I exchanged a meaningful glance. It looks like our private conversation is about to become very public, I observed. No, my father said, standing up and straightening his suit jacket with determination. I think this presents an excellent opportunity. What do you mean? I want to go downstairs and face those reporters directly, he said with growing confidence. I want to publicly apologize for my past behavior, and I want the entire world to know that I am proud of my daughter. I studied his face carefully, seeing genuine resolve in his expression. Are you absolutely certain about this? This will become national news and will be reported everywhere. I am completely certain, he nodded firmly. For years, I have been pursuing other people's approval, chasing social status, and focusing on superficial measures of success. But I have ignored the most important thing, family relationships. Today, I want to do something genuinely meaningful. I want to publicly support my daughter. 10 minutes later, we walked out of the office building together. The lobby and sidewalk were indeed crowded with reporters and photographers, and camera flashes immediately began firing in rapid succession, like a lightning storm. My father did not attempt to avoid the media attention. Instead, he walked directly toward the cluster of microphones that had been set up near the building entrance. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said in a clear, strong voice that carried easily across the gathering, "I am James Williams, Jasmine Williams' father. I came here today to publicly apologize to my daughter and to correct the mistakes I have made." The media representatives quieted down immediately, focusing their complete attention on his words. Several days ago, at my birthday celebration, I introduced my daughter in a dismissive and disrespectful manner. I said she was just working in a restaurant. Now I know how wrong I was. She was not just working in a restaurant, she was revolutionizing the entire food industry. He turned toward me, his eyes filled with love and pride. "Jasmine, you are the most talented and determined person I have ever encountered. You built a billion-dollar company in 3 years. But more importantly, you have maintained your humility and connection to the real world throughout this incredible journey. You never forgot your roots, and you never forgot about people who are working in positions similar to where you started." He faced the reporters again with renewed confidence. "I am here today to announce that I will be joining my daughter's company. I am not coming as a consultant or senior executive. I am coming as a student. I want to learn from her business philosophy, understand her values, and discover how to create genuine value for society." A reporter raised her hand with a question. "Mr. Williams, do you feel this experience has changed your definition of success?" My father considered this thoughtfully before responding. "Yes, absolutely. I used to think success meant accumulating wealth, achieving high social status, and wielding significant influence. But now I understand that true success means bringing positive change to the world and helping others realize their potential. My daughter has accomplished these things, while I am still learning what they really mean." Another journalist asked, "What advice would you give to other parents, especially those whose children have chosen non-traditional career paths?" This question prompted a longer pause before my father answered. "Trust your children completely. Do not measure their worth using your own success template or expectations. Every person has their own unique path and special talents. As parents, our job is not to limit their choices, but to support them as they pursue their dreams." I almost missed the opportunity to witness a miracle because of my narrow-mindedness. Do not make the same mistake I did. The impromptu press conference continued for approximately 30 minutes. Finally, my father turned to me and spoke directly in front of all the assembled media representatives. "Jasmine, I love you, and I am incredibly proud of everything you have achieved. If you are willing to accept an old student into your organization, I hope to learn much more from your example." I stepped forward and embraced him warmly as countless camera flashes illuminated us both. "Welcome to the team, Dad," I whispered. That evening, news of our father-daughter reconciliation dominated headlines across every major media outlet. On social media platforms, the hashtag #ProudDadMoment became a trending topic worldwide. Thousands of people began sharing their own stories of family reconciliation, understanding, and support. However, for me personally, the most important outcome was not the external media coverage or public reaction. The most significant result was that I finally had a father who truly understood and supported me while he was beginning an entirely new chapter of his own life journey.